Welcome to the NatRefs Show, a weekly podcast on the ever-changing world of natural refrigerants, brought to you by Shecco with support from component maker Teco. Today we will be discussing the major news items impacting the world of natural refrigerants. My name is Michael Garry, and I'm North American editor for Shecco, based in the New York area bureau. I'll be hosting today's podcast, and I'll be joined today by my colleagues Andrew Williams, Brussels-based European editor, Lydia Matthäus, events coordinator for Shecco, based in Brussels, and Devin Yoshimoto, Tokyo-based Asian Pacific reporter. So, good to be with you, Andrew.
Good to be with you, Michael.
All right. We've got a full agenda today. We'll be discussing first my trip to the National Restaurant Association show in Chicago this past weekend. We'll hear from Andrew about an interesting transcritical store in Portugal that uses an ejector to improve efficiency in the warm climates. And then we'll be hearing from Devin Yoshimoto, who will be reporting from Australia and talking about the heat pump situation there. And finally, our events coordinator, Lydia, will discuss the upcoming atmosphere events in America and South Africa. So I will start with a little talk about my trip to Chicago this past Sunday for the very big National Restaurant Association NRA show. It's a massive event which takes up much of the convention center, which is in itself a massive place. And I spoke to quite a few of the manufacturers there who make cabinets, display cases for food service, restaurants, as well as stores. And the shift to R290 propane from HFCs continues to be quite significant. I spoke to something like a dozen companies, and they were all transitioning, either have finished their transition, still in the process, or just beginning, but they're all heading in the direction of propane. And one of the major companies there is True Manufacturing. I spoke to them about how their sales are going, especially because one of the main drivers, well, there was one key main driver for the shift to hydrocarbons, which is, of course, very efficient refrigerant, was the increased efficiency requirements set by the Department of Energy last year. So that drove a lot of progress. But there was another regulatory piece that was going to drive progress, namely that the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, was phasing out, or actually delisting, certain HFC refrigerants used in these cabinets. At least they were until last August, when the Court of Appeals threw out that rule. And so now the EPA basically announced last month that they're not applying the original rule regarding HFCs. So
what impact, Michael, has this had on the market, if any? What feedback did you get from manufacturers? Is it leading to a rollback in R&D or take-up of natural refrigerant alternatives, or has it not had any effect?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I asked True Manufacturing, which is the biggest company doing this, and the pioneer of it, whether they would be affected by this reversal on HFCs. And fellow I spoke to there, Todd Washburn, their director of sales and marketing, said no, it's not really affecting their sales of R290 equipment. He said it really hasn't slowed us down. If there's a choice between still HFCs and natural refrigerants, we're not getting people saying, I don't want the natural refrigerant. He did acknowledge that there is some change in the sense that it gives OEMs more time to transition out of HFCs than they originally thought. And before, it was right around the corner that they'd have to switch out of HFCs, but now they have more time to do that. I mean, theoretically, they have as much time as they want, but truth is that the expectation HFCs will be regulated in the U.S. on a federal level at some point in some manner, which yet to be determined. This situation is in flux right now between the court case and what's going on in the Congress with respect
and also with Kigali. Yeah,
right, exactly. Kigali, the Trump administration's decision about whether to refer Kigali to the Senate for ratification is still sort of up in the air, despite the lobbying of many of the manufacturing companies in the U.S. who want us to approve Kigali so that they have free reign to sell their wares globally. It would affect them severely on an economic basis if Kigali is not approved. So they're pushing for that. Trump and his EPA are dragging their heels, not surprisingly. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, there's a lot going on with HFCs. In the meantime, though, as I said, it's not being enforced on federal level, and so these companies have a little more time. On the other hand, there's the issue of California, which is a huge piece of the United States that's doing its own, going ahead with its own regulations of HFCs. Companies do not want to have to address California separately from the rest of the United States. So California may end up driving the agenda and driving the way that manufacturers approach this in the end. So it's a very complicated situation. I'm going to be writing about it extensively in the next Accelerate America magazine coming out in June. But as I mentioned, True is not hardly the only company switching over to hydrocarbons. Several other companies, Delfield, which is a manufacturer of cabinets, a division of Well-Built, they're doing it. Trolson has hydrocarbon units, although they're also making it clear they still offer HFC units. Turbo Air is a company switching primarily, really exclusively to hydrocarbons. Master Built, Beverage Air. A couple of companies that are in the early stages are Continental and Blue Air Refrigeration. So it's amazing. I mean, everywhere I went, I heard about hydrocarbons in Chicago.
And a lot of these are U.S. companies, right? So it's not necessarily European companies operating in the U.S. It's a sign that the U.S. market itself is getting on board with this technology.
Right. I mean, the big European player is AHT, which, of course, is big into hydrocarbons. But yeah, a lot of U.S. companies do this. True Manufacturing, which also markets in Europe and elsewhere in the world. They're based in the U.S. Well-Built is based here. Turbo Air, Beverage Air. So yeah, all these companies are U.S. based, and many of them do sell globally. So what they're doing is definitely going to be reverberate around the world. So it's certainly an interesting trend that I saw in Chicago. So over to you, Andrew, to hear about what's happening in Portugal.
Yeah, so an update on what's happening with the uptake of ejectors for CO2 transcritical systems in Europe. Regular listeners of the NatRefs show and readers of Accelerate Europe magazine will have heard about market trends for ejectors, particularly in Southern Europe, and how this had primarily been driven by some of the big multinational retailers. So I'm thinking of Carrefour, for example, who are using ejectors in some of their stores in Italy, in the south of France, and in the south of Spain. But they've been yet to penetrate into the Portuguese market. And this changed last Friday with the opening of one of the Portuguese retail sector's first ever stores to use a CO2 transcritical system fitted with an ejector. So it's fitted with the multi-ejector from Danfoss, the store opened last Friday. It's a Pingo Doce hypermarket in Alverca near the capital, Lisbon. Pingo Doce is part of the Jerónimo Martins Group. That's a Portuguese multinational food retail company that also owns HVAC Cash and Carry. Readers of Accelerate Europe will be familiar with HVAC Cash and Carry because they were the cover of the current edition. Jerónimo Martins also has Biedronka in Poland and Ara in Colombia. And yeah, so going back to the Pingo Doce hypermarket, the installer was a local Portuguese company called Hiperfrio. All of HVAC and Pingo Doce's hypermarkets, the complete management of the technical maintenance and subcontracting services are outsourced to an equipment sales and maintenance firm based in Braga, Portugal, called Gesfust. And so they were working on the Alverca store, and the actual technical specification was drawn up by a consulting company called Consul Frio, another big player in the Portuguese market. So if we look at the bigger picture beyond the opening of the Pingo Doce hypermarket last week, I think the fact that we've got some of Portugal's biggest contractors and consulting firms working on this project only bodes well for the future for using ejectors in Portugal's warm climates. I think there'll be some learnings from this store, and we can expect a wider uptake in the years coming forward.
So the ejector is the key here, right? It enables them to operate efficiently in the warmer climate there.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in Portugal, obviously around Lisbon itself, particularly also down in the Algarve, you've got scorching summer temperatures. So if there was ever a test ground for the efficiency of CO2 transcritical systems in warmer climates, it would be Portugal. So what Pingo Doce and the wider Jerónimo Martins group will do, they'll look at this store, they'll collect data in the coming months and look to roll out ejectors in more stores going forward. The wider Jerónimo Martins group is committed to natural refrigerants across its different brands, and so we can only expect that certainly for Pingo Doce and HVAC in Portugal that we're going to see not just more and more CO2 transcritical stores, but more with ejectors as well going forward.
Right, and they've already seen that in other countries in warm climates, the ejector saving energy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned the Carrefour in Spain. We visited them in Catalonia not so long ago for the opening of a new store down there. That was actually a trip that was organised around the Atmosphere Europe conference in April 2016, and since then we've spoken to Carrefour, and they're very happy with the performance of the CO2 transcritical system in Catalonia's warm climate. And since then, they've opened more stores in the south of Spain, in the south of France, and in Italy. So Carrefour, and also in Brazil, they've started to use the ejectors in their CO2 transcritical systems in Brazil. So I think in terms of the market experience of using ejectors to improve the efficiency of these systems in warmer climates, we're starting to see them being taken up more. What was new about the Portugal story is it's one of the first, if not the first, so a kind of testing the market type situation.
It's encouraging to see what's happening with ejectors in the European markets that have warm climates, because it's really, the ejector is just starting to be adopted in the United States, and where there's of course a lot of warm areas in the southern geography. So this is another example of where the U.S. market will hopefully follow suit with the Europeans in terms of incorporating the ejector and other types of technologies to make the systems work better in the warmer
Yes, the ejector manufacturer for the Pingo Doce store, which has just opened, is Danfoss. It's Danfoss's multi-ejector. So you can expect Danfoss to take the data and the experience in this store and use that for their other stores with CO2 transcritical systems and ejectors in other warm climate areas. So I think the opening of this store, again, it's another positive step in wider rollout of ejector technology around the world.
Yeah, Danfoss has one ejector in the Georgia store, a Sprouts store. All right, we're now going to hear from our Tokyo correspondent Devin Yoshimoto, as well as shecco's events leader, Lydia Matthäus. Over to those colleagues.
Thanks, Michael. This is Devin reporting for shecco from our Tokyo bureau. I'm a reporter for Asia Pacific, and I'm also sitting here with shecco's global events manager, Lydia. Hi, Lydia.
Hi, Devin.
So I just want to give a quick update on the market for heat pumps and heat pump technology in Australia and what we learned over our recent trip there for the Atmosphere Australia conference and the ARBS exhibition. And what we're seeing is that there's a large opportunity for heat pumps, and especially natural refrigerant-based heat pumps, to replace a lot of the old existing gas-fired boiler technology that is still very popular and widely in use in the Australian market, especially in the commercial and industrial sector, for providing hot water, like for hotels or for industrial food processing. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the manufacturers are beginning to become more vocal in marketing heat pumps towards their forward-thinking and environmentally conscious end users right now. A lot of these end users are looking for alternative technology to replace their gas boilers because the price of gas and electricity is increasing very rapidly. And they also are becoming generally more environmentally conscious and wanting to find a way to reduce their carbon emissions. And for them to know that natural refrigerant-based heat pumps can help them do that makes this technology very attractive for them. Now, heat pump technology is still not widely known in the market, and there are several barriers holding back this technology. One of the things that we did during the Atmosphere Australia conference was we held a heat pump workshop where we invited a lot of the industry experts to sit down and talk about what were the main barriers holding back this technology and what were the main solutions for these barriers. So I just want to go over a couple of the points that were found during this workshop. And the top barrier that was identified was the high capital cost of heat pump technology. It makes it very difficult for businesses to make the upfront investment to replace their boilers with natural refrigerant-based heat pumps. But one of the solutions that was suggested for this barrier was to encourage a lot of the contractors and technology suppliers to be more active in providing return on investment calculations and analysis to show that in certain applications, the efficiency of CO2 heat pumps or natural refrigerant-based heat pumps can really provide a long-term payback, a big advantage over using gas-fired boilers in Australia. One of the biggest barriers also that was identified was just the lack of awareness and lack of education throughout the supply chain. This means technicians, consultants, engineers, contractors, and also end users of heat pump technology. And one of the things that was identified as a solution to that was to help encourage more proactive sales and marketing by both manufacturers and consultants to help spread the awareness of the technology and have more proactive communication about the benefits of this of heat pumps. And finally, one of the other barriers that was found during this workshop was the fact that Australia has a very challenging and specific climate and environment, and that heat pumps would not be a great fit in certain applications. But one of the main solutions that was identified for this barrier was to help support pilot projects and pilot installations to help build that foundation and to help start sharing the knowledge of how heat pumps can work efficiently in certain applications so that you can start building the case for how heat pumps can be designed to work well in Australia's climate. So during this heat pump workshop, a lot of good ideas were formed, and we had a lot of good solutions identified for some of the biggest barriers holding back heat pump technology, which we're seeing now has a very big opportunity in Australia.
Okay, so you did mention that the day after Atmosphere, you also went to the ARPS Expo, where there are many heat pumps on display there as well?
Yeah, so when we were down at the ARBS exhibition, we actually had a chance to speak a little bit more in depth with a lot of the suppliers of heat pump technology in Australia. We spoke with Peter O'Neill, who's a sales manager for Mayakawa, and they provide their CO2-based heat pump, the Unimo, in the Australian market. And the sign was very encouraging. He told us that about 6 to 12 months ago, the amount of inquiries that he would get would only be about one a month. But recently, over the past 3 to 4 months, he said he's getting inquiries just about every week. And he's saying that a lot of this interest in the CO2 heat pump, the Unimo, is mainly due to the increasing price of gas and electricity. And one of the other interesting things we saw was that we spoke to another local supplier of hot water solutions in Australia, a company called Automatic Heating. And what they told us was that they were starting to get a lot of inquiries from their end users and a lot of their customers for hot water solutions that were not based on fossil fuels or not based on gas-fired boilers, because a lot of their customers were looking for ways to increase the efficiency of their hot water systems, to reduce their carbon emissions as a business. So they were looking to be more environmentally sustainable as a company. And they were also just looking to protect themselves against the high rising costs of gas and electricity in Australia. And the company decided to bring in the Atomic, Japanese-based company, CO2-based heat pump in Australia. And they're very excited because they're already getting orders for the system, and they see a big opportunity to find more of these kinds of customers in Australia. So we're really starting to see things shifting in the Australian market because of high gas prices, because of general trend towards more environmentally conscious end users. And the HFC phase down, which is driving this opportunity for heat pump technology and natural refrigerant-based heat pump technology to replace a large portion of the hot water solutions based on fossil fuels and burning gas in Australia.
Thanks, Devin. Indeed, that sounds like a very exciting trip that you had to Australia there recently. And as if that's not enough, we actually have a few other exciting Atmosphere events coming up very soon. And the next one that's happening is going to be a first one for us, as we're heading to South Africa, and we're going to be in Johannesburg for our first Atmosphere in the African continent. On the 7th of June, we'll be hosting Atmosphere Network FRIGAIR, which is in collaboration with our single sponsor CRS, Commercial Refrigeration Services, and will take place on the second day of the FRIGAIR Expo, which is actually Africa's largest heating and cooling expo. So this Atmosphere is going to be a short half-day event where we will be discussing everything about NatRefs and where they are currently standing in the South African continent. So some of the highlights we have is actually our speakers listing. We have a really good selection from the local refrigeration and sector, including a speaker from the Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Institute, CIRAC. We also have some technology end users, including Woolworths and Into Food, who are actually sharing their real experience with the naturals, and also a representative from the Department of Environmental Affairs. And Devin, you know what's the best thing about this event is the entrance is free. So that means everybody's invited to join. We just ask that we have advanced registration. So simply go to atmo.org/FRIGAIR 2018, and there you can register for free. And like this, we can make sure you have a seat available on the day.
Yeah, free registration. I mean, it sounds like a really good way to get the Atmosphere Conference introduced in a brand new region, South Africa. Wow, that's really exciting. We also have another Atmosphere event coming up in the same month, don't we?
That's right, actually. Yes, it's literally the week after we're in South Africa. We're going to go to California. So we will be in Long Beach for our 7th Atmosphere America. So that's our second biggest event actually this year, taking place over 3 days, and it's happening June 12th to 14th. And I mean, I think we'll all know that there is maybe a bit of challenges currently pushing through environmental initiatives at federal level over there, which is really the reason for us, even more the reason, to put more focus on natural refrigerants, and especially as well how refrigeration plays a major impact in the environmental practices. So one of the leaders in politics at the moment, already for quite some years in California, is State Senator Ricardo Lara. So he is very proactively supporting the HFC phase down already with his 2016 Super Pollutant Reduction Act. And now he's pushing also for more incentives, also for natural refrigerants, with his California Cooling Act. So of course, we had to invite him to speak, and now we're actually very, very proud and honored to have him as a key speaker on June the 12th, so the first day of the conference, for a 1-hour onstage interview with our CEO, Mark. Of course, as it's a 3-day event, there is some other things happening. On day 2 of the conference, we actually have, and that's the first time this year, this time for Atmosphere, that we have a long exhibitor afternoon, which will give all participants who are at the Atmosphere about 4 hours time for doing some proper and thorough networking. So the exhibitor floor is open, so you can really get into the nitty-gritty of the details. And in addition to this, we also offer private meeting rooms for hire by the hour. So if anybody wants to have one-on-one meetings with clients, for example, they can really get in touch and book that with us. And also we're bringing back technomercials this year, where, by the way, we have a few spots available at the moment. So we do still take a few additional presentations, but some are already on the program. And yeah, we're really looking forward to that. Then, and last thing as well that I do think is really worth highlighting is our food retail panel. So that is always super popular at all our events and will take place on day 3. It includes this year's speakers from Riley, Sprouts, Loaves Paint Safe, and also from Grocery Outlet. And yeah, that's going to be definitely very exciting. I mean, frankly, there is much more going on, but I think if I continue talking about Atmosphere America, we'll definitely run over time with this podcast. But yeah, please, I can only recommend everybody check out the program. It's on atmo.org/America 2018/program, and make sure you register before the tickets are gone.
We're going to be doing Accelerate Awards again this year, aren't we?
Oh, yes, definitely we are. So this year is going to be the second year that we are honoring the Accelerate America Awards. That will take place on day 2. So during our gala dinner in the evening, we'll be giving out the awards, and they are really honoring the most influential, most innovative, and most important people and companies of the NatRef world in the whole of North America. And we have categories including Best in Sector, then some new awards like our Best Contractor Award, and of course as well the Best Person of the Year. So yeah, definitely stay tuned for who's going to get those.
Great. Yeah. So I definitely also I'll just second that. I really recommend everyone to check out atmo.org/America 2018 to get more information. There's definitely a lot going on. I mean, I feel like Atmosphere Australia and ARBS just finished yesterday. But we have so much going on this month also with our first event in South Africa, and then Atmosphere America also this month. So a lot to look forward to. Thanks, Lydia, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you, Lydia. Well, that wraps up today's NatRef show. I want to thank my colleagues, Andrew, Devin, and Lydia, and thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week on the NatRef show.